So this is SharePoint Online Search in the cloud. I'm going to be covering a lot of the stuff. If you guys came to my session yesterday, I did display templates and query rules. This one is going to be kind of all of the other trimmings around that, staying in the Search Center, working out some different business problems in Search. My name is Matt McDermott. I'm a SharePoint MVP. I work at a consulting company called Aptalon with 4 friends of mine, including Gary LaPointe, who's also one of the speakers here. He's on the IT Pro track, does a lot of presentations around management, IT, and PowerShell. I live in Austin, Texas. My wife, my dog, Ruby. If dog training paid as well as SharePoint consulting, I would not be a SharePoint consultant. Okay? I just wouldn't. I have too much fun doing this with her, with other dogs. Recently, I've started running some of the other dogs in the class with me. We do this as a behavioral thing. If my dog misbehaves, I put her where she has full view of the field. She's in a crate, she's safe, and I run somebody else's dog. You want to get your dog's attention? Go play with somebody else's dog. Yeah, they run really well after that. This is what she looks like most of the time when I'm away. At least that's in my mind, that's what I think she looks like. She's actually being taken really good care of while we're gone. I'm also an author, a blogger. I train for critical path training. But the important things to know are the contact info at the bottom. You're perfectly welcome to email me anytime you like. If you have a question about search, a lot of the business scenarios that I develop for these demos come directly from people's questions. Like, we're trying to do this, and sometimes it's just, can we do it with search? Sometimes it's, this is what they're doing and it just feels wrong to me. Is there a better way? Is there a righter way? Because, it's SharePoint. There's 9 different ways to do everything. Some of them are more right than others. But you're welcome to ask me questions anytime, particularly if you don't get a chance to see me later today, anywhere in the audience, anywhere in the show. Tonight at the dinner, you got to go to the speaker party. If you've never been to one of Steve's parties, you have not lived or woken up the next morning feeling like you've died. Okay, it's completely worth it. So we're going to talk a little bit about configuring search in Office 365, some of the features that you should know about. I show the features that are available in the site collections because if you're an IT pro, if you're deploying SharePoint on-prem, you need to know that your end users have access to all this stuff too, okay? And sometimes it can make your troubleshooting go a lot easier if you realize how much control they actually have in the site collections. We'll talk about some of the search-driven features that are available in Office 365, and then I'm going to run through some of the tricks of the trade. There is a lot that's different between Office 365 and SharePoint on-prem. The primary things that are different is that in the tenant admin, you just don't have as much control, okay? You have a subset of things available to you. For instance, in SharePoint on-prem, if I want to connect to a file share, I just go in and create a new content source. You cannot create new content sources in Office 365. You also can't control your crawl schedules, but I will show you some ways that you can actually show when the item was last crawled. So at least you have that information available to you. You also can't really kick off a new crawl. All you can do is kind of say, hey, next time you come by, would you please recrawl this list or site? So you can do that in Office 365, but you can also do that on-prem. With managed properties, I'll show you a demo of this. We're going to go through and create some managed properties so that we can make our demo work. I'm going to fake it. I'm going to be honest with you, because when you create the managed properties, you then have to wait for the crawler to come by. So literally, 7 days ago, I started building out this demo tenant, and it went something like create a couple managed properties, looking at my script for what I wanted to teach, put some data in, and then literally go do my work for my client. Because I had to wait until Office 365 crawled everything. So you don't have that level of control. But in the interface, you can reuse managed properties. So MP here is I just shortened it a little bit for screen space. But you configure managed properties that are already there. So Microsoft has seen fit to give you managed properties that are all ready to go for refinement, for sortability, and things like that, as well as special data types like date and Boolean, because you cannot create new managed properties of those data types. And then, of course, in the on-premise farm, if you're using all the features, you have content by search. And then, of course, in Office 365, they do have content by search, but it depends. It depends on a lot of different things, including what site features are there. So I generally put an asterisk there because It may be there and available to you, but I'm going to show you why you don't need it. Okay? And so if it's not available to you for your tenant or for the features or just because you don't want to use it, I'm going to give you a quick demo of why, and it'll kind of set the tone for what I'm going to be talking about for the rest of the session. So I'm going to start off with just using search in a smart way. One of the things I hate is when I come into a client and they say, well, so we have this list of our employees that have these skills or attributes, or I have a list of employees that are in the IT department. Well, we all know that about 3 minutes after they've populated that list, it's completely out of date, and it's never maintained. So I'll simply ask them, of those 7 people, how many of them are still here? I don't know. Who made the list? Oh, that's been here for a while. So is the list still accurate? Well, we've had a few hires, and so the list is out of date. So what you can do instead is use the user profile service. Use the user profile service. If you're going to keep track of somebody's skills, use the skills field that's built into the user profile service. That way, as soon as somebody gets that skill, they put it in their user profile, and then they show up in the list of whoever has that skill. Yesterday, I showed you a display template that used that notary flag. And so if I do a search here for skills contains notary, I get a list of the people who have notary on their user profile. Because this list is maintained by the people themselves, if they get mad that they're not on the list, tell them go update their profile. Because as soon as the crawler comes through, they will appear in this list. Okay, but nobody's going to go here to find a notary. So what's happened is our legal department has called us up and said they want a list of people that they're going to put on their site. Because the number one question they get asked in this particular circumstance is, who are the notaries? So what I'm going to do is just put a list over here of our notaries. And what most people would do is create a new list of type contact or worse, custom, and just put in their names. So what we're going to do instead is be smart about it. We're going to go to Edit. And this works whether or not you have the Content by Search web part, because I'm not going to use the Content by Search web part. Instead, what I'm going to do is drop down here, add a web part, and I'm going to add from the search folder, I'm just going to add a search result web part. And after it refreshes, it's going to take up a ton of screen space. And I'm simply going to edit this. And get in here and change the query. The query is really simple. I'm going to run it against the people result source. So I'm going to go up here to people. That's like changing tabs in the search center. And then down here, I don't care what the search box query is. I'm simply going to come in here and I'm going to choose the skills. The skills contains a manual value of notary. So you've heard of companies that want to do a directory of by department. Then department equals whatever the department is. Super easy to do. You could even do little tabs that fed the query string with the different department names, and the UI would change every time you change the URL, because you can also pull this value off of one of any number of ranges of values from the URL. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. In this case, I'm just going to hard code it. I'll go ahead and test the query, and you'll notice that it has Ali, Garth, Ruby, Zarinka, and Belinda there. Those are the same folks that we had in the original one. Then I'm just going to make a few other little setting changes. I'm going to show, I don't care about promoted results or did you mean or personal favorites. I also don't care about seeing the advanced search link or the preferences and about me. Now, about me is interesting. If you get a new notary and you have about me selected, it'll email you and tell you got somebody new on your team. Interesting ways of using search, right? Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is change the appearance here. We'll go ahead and call this our notaries, and we'll change the Chrome so that we've got, let's say title and border is fine. We'll choose OK there. And then we'll come up to page, simply save the page, and we can check it in or do whatever we want. And once I've got that running, you'll notice that we'll start seeing our notaries down the side. So it's giving us that list because anytime somebody changes, I should have taken off the preferences in English as well. Anytime somebody changes their user profile, adds themselves or removes themselves as a notary, and then the crawl runs against the user profile service, this list will change, constantly staying up to date. Okay? Any of the attributes on the user profile service, if you want to do this as a sales dashboard, content type equals contract, boom. All of a sudden you're seeing just your contracts in there. New products, whatever you want to do. You can put in date ranges. So just different ways of not having to use SharePoint lists because the data is up to date in the right areas. Okay, so let's back up just a little bit and talk more about different areas of search. So, there we go. Okay, so when we're working in Office 365 or in SharePoint 2013, any SharePoint 2013, one of the biggest features of search, which involves using managed properties. The problem we had was that as a farm administrator in 2010, I would create those. So if I was working with the search team, or if I come in as a consultant and start working with a business that wants to do a search project, I have to go to the farm administrators, and first I have to explain what managed properties are and why we need them. And then I have to explain why we need to do a full crawl. Because after you create a managed property, you populate it from a crawled property by doing a full crawl. So that thing that takes 3 weeks in your company, yeah, you have to do a full crawl. But there's a trick for that, and I'll talk about that in just a sec. One of the advantages we have in SharePoint 2013 is that it automatically creates managed properties for us if 2 conditions are true. The first is you have to use site columns. Okay? So if you just add a column to a list, it's not going to do this. But if you create a site column, add the site column to a list or library. That's the first condition. The second condition is you have to put information in it. Okay? So you have to populate it with some data. You don't have to populate like 20,000 values. You just need one record. If you put one record in, and let's say that site column type is a single line of text called product name, SharePoint is going to come through. It's going to create a crawled property of exactly this name. OWS_Q_ data type is text _ the name that I used in the site column. And of course, none of you are using spaces in your site column names, right? Because that would be stupid, right? You know what happens when you use spaces? A kitten dies. You didn't know that? No, it's not a puppy. We don't mess with the dogs here. If you use a space, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of garbage in between the word product and the word name. And it just makes things ugly. So don't use spaces in your column names. Come in after the fact. We call it, in Texas, we call it the SharePoint two-step. That's create the column, save it, then go back in, edit the column, add the space. Because at that point, you're only changing the display name. Okay? All right. Then it's going to create a managed property of the name of your managed property, so the name of your original column, and then OWS text, just like that. Then you can use these in your search solutions. You don't have to call IT. You don't have to call Microsoft and say, hey, I need this managed property, because they're going to hand these to you. Okay? So if it's multiple lines of text, it'll end up being M text, like that. It's a choice field, CHCS. This is just 5 of them. All of the data types are represented. If they're managed metadata fields, it ends up with OWS tax ID and stuff like that. I've got a link at the end of this for the whole page of all of these and all of the special little considerations. The one downside to this model is that even though the data type is represented here, they are all text. Okay, so if you have a date field, it's going to be text here. What that means in your queries is that you cannot do greater than that field. You can't do less than that field. The date math doesn't work. So you have to create a managed property for those, or actually what you have to do is reassign them. So I'm going to do a demo that I call Managed Property 101 to show you how we create these. So there are two different slices of the index. If you have a property that's associated with people attributes, or if you want that property to work mainly on the people tab instead of the everything tab, you have to tell SharePoint about it, and I'll show you that in a demo in just a sec. But for regular content fields, you don't have to make any special changes. Please don't use any special characters like a dot or a dash in your managed property names. Just slam them all together, and I use camel case, okay? But don't use a dash. Why? If you use a dash, dashes in search queries mean whatever's after the dash, I don't want to see it in my query. And managed property names will mess with the way the query processing works if they have that dash, so don't do that. Then you have to decide on special attributes. There are data types like multi-values. The data types would be like date, number, decimal, those kinds of things. Then they can have multiple values. So if you have a choice field that allows multiple, then you need to have the multi-attribute. You have to decide whether they're queryable. Can I ask the question, author equals Matt? Or searchable. If I just type in Matt, is it going to return? And sometimes there's little subtle differences in how you want to do that. The other one that's weird in there is safe. Safe means that it can be returned to the UI in an anonymous mode. Okay? So I did have a client that called me up panicking. They just published their publicly facing website with SharePoint search pages. None of the search pages were working if you were anonymous, but the dev team had never noticed it because every time they went to the site, it automatically authenticated them. And so they were running searches as themselves. All the data was coming back. All we had to do was go in and mark all the managed properties as safe, then rerun the crawl, and then all of a sudden the search pages started working. Okay, and then you have to choose between refinable, whether you're going to refine on the attribute. Like if you had, social security number or employee ID, probably not a great thing to refine on. But if it's the color of a product and you want people to find it, or a price, then you can make those refinable or sortable. So all of those attributes are handled by your managed properties. The thing that's different in Office 365 or in your SharePoint site collections is that when you're, let's go back to search here. When you're in your search site collection, or actually in any site collection, and you go into site settings, what you will see is that there is a search schema link here for the whole site collection. So this will affect any searches, any web parts running search, any search centers that are created in this site collection. If I choose the site settings here for schema, it's just this site collection, okay? So at the tenant level, you have these settings. At the site collection level, you have these settings. And at the site, you have these settings. And the way it's supposed to work, and I say that because I used to say the way it works until the other day when my tenant started doing really weird things, is all of a sudden my site level settings were being overridden by my tenant, which isn't supposed to happen. It's supposed to channel down. And when I mentioned it to the guys that were helping with tech support, they were like, wow, that's weird. Let's figure out why everything's broken first, okay? So the way it's supposed to work is farm, or a tenant, site collection, site. I'm going to spend all my time here in search schema for this demo, for this site collection. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a couple of different managed properties that I admit I've already created because I couldn't create them and then have, in 1 hour, have everything populated unless it was a VM that I was running. So I'm going to click on Search Schema, and that'll take us into, what is going on with you? Why are you sitting there? There we go. Okay, so this is showing me my managed properties. These are the values that I can use. These are the terms that I can use in queries in search. But there's 800 of them. If I go into crawled properties, these are the ones that the indexer has discovered and may or may not be associated with managed properties yet. So in this case, there are so many that they give us these categories. In general, the categories are basic and SharePoint. So all of the ones from SharePoint came from SharePoint. The ones from the user profile service came from people. Other things like business data, if you're running BCS solutions, all of your crawled properties are going to be under there. So it just makes it easier to find things. So what I'm going to do is jump in here to people, and I'm going to look up the Twitter account name. that I referenced yesterday when I was doing my demo. I've created a custom user profile property called Twitter account name. And it comes across, if you guys can see this, I can't really scroll the page down so much, so hopefully you can see that in the back. But it says Twitter account name here. So this is the property that the crawler discovered the first time it ran through my newly updated user profile service and found Twitter account name. So it applied it there. Then what I did was came into Manage Properties, and I selected New Managed Property. And in the New Managed Property dialog, I gave it the name that I'm going to use when I'm creating my solutions, which was easy. I just called it Twitter account name, just like that. Now, I do recommend that you use the description field, because that way you can explain to the person who's coming in after you, this is our company's stuff. You know, I've even gone so far as using a managed property that like a 3-letter prefix of the company, like if you use their NetBIOS name or something like that. And that's where I discovered the little dash issue, is I did NetBIOS name dash and nothing's working. And then we started changing the names because it was the only thing we could figure out. So you can do that as well. But you'll notice that integer, decimal, date, time, yes, no, double, those are all grayed out. The only thing I can select here is text, because the only new kinds of managed properties I can create are text or yes, no. I can't create any others. I have to reassign them. I'll show you that in just a sec. Then I have to decide, what am I going to do with this? Do I want to make it searchable? In other words, a free text search will find this. Okay? So sure, let's do that. Do I want to make it queryable? Absolutely. I want to do Twitter account name, Matthew McD, and find my value. Okay? If you're going to do those kinds of queries, you use queryable. Running down the rest of the attributes. Is it retrievable? So you can query on something and not send it back, not send the value back. There are some business cases where that's a good thing. In our case, I want to retrieve it. The refinable, that's disabled. Multi-value, disabled. Sortable, disabled. I can mark it as safe. In this case, I don't need to. It's on my intranet. I can give it an alias. In other words, do I want to call it by a different name? And then finally, at the bottom here is where I add the mapping. Before I do that, let me just show you this little button here. This button is where I decide if I make no changes, it's going to be in the regular content index. Think of it that way. It's the regular documents, list items, and all of that stuff. But if I come in here and change this to people, it's now going to behave like the people attributes on the people tab. Okay? So if you have a contact list of your customers, instead of using BCS, for example, if you have a contact list of your customers and you want them to show up in the people index, then you can do that to make it go. There's also custom weighting, which I don't have the time to go into, but there's a whole bunch of custom weighting you can apply to this field to make that work. Lastly, down here at the bottom is where we establish, there we go. Down here at the bottom is where we establish the mapping. So in this case, I'm going to choose add a mapping. And I'm going to change this to people. And I'm simply going to go find that Twitter account name field that we had before. And so you'll see this is all of the values out of the user profile service. And so here's our Twitter account name. Okay. Now, this is magic. Okay? I'm going to give 3 people the same task. I'm going to give each of them a site collection. I'm going to ask each of them to create one list that tracks my products by product ID, product color, product description, list price. Go forth, build me a solution. How many different variances of names of columns am I going to get back? Which one's going to use spaces? Right? It's all going to look the same, but under the covers, the crawler is going to discover the differences. So if you used product ID, you use product num, and you use product whatever, I can put all 3 of those in here. I can call it product ID because that's what I asked them for. And if it finds it on your site and I mark it as include content from the first crawled property, then it's going to find your list, and yours is going to be the only one of those 3 populated. and I will be able to find all of their content. So search becomes the great consolidator as well if you use these properties the right way. Okay, so I told you we could create string fields, but we can't do a whole lot else. If I need to do a date field, like for instance in a demo that I'm going to do in a little bit, I have a field called contract expiration date. So I have a content type of contracts. Contracts have expiration dates. So if I come in here and I type in contract, and I find my contract expiration date right here. So the contract expiration date is OWS _ contract expiration date. Look, Ma, no spaces. Okay? The OWS part comes because it's part of SharePoint. It's just a prefix that the crawler uses to tell you where it came from. So what I have to do, because I want to refine on that managed property, what I have to do is I have to go find the pre-provisioned managed properties that Microsoft has given me in Office 365. So I'm going to type in REFINABLE, refinable. They're called refinable date, refinable text, or refinable string, refinable whatever. So if you want to find the refinable date fields, you just do refinable D, and it'll go find the refinable date fields. So here's refinable date 00, 01, 02, 03. And so if I come all the way down here, what I did was I grabbed refinable date 10 and I chose edit the property. Now notice that these are refinable, sortable, all of the values that I need. I can't change any of them, so they're queryable, they're retrievable, they're refinable, I can't change that. They're sortable, can't change that. Okay? They're marked as safe already, and so I made that change. And oh no, I didn't. I did it on refinable date 1, but that's okay. Let's go back here. So I did everything that I did before. I just edited the one that was already here. And that's what you have to do in Office 365. You can't create new date fields. It's a performance thing. It's a scalability thing. It's a thing. They won't let you do it. Okay? So this is what they do. They gave you a ton of these that you can do yourself. So we create these fields, and then we wait. We wait for the crawls to occur. You can go into the site where the data exists. You can, and there it is, OWS contract expiration date. And so what I did, because I don't like the fact that it's called refinable date 02, is this is where I use the alias. And so I use the alias contract expiration. Now that I've got contract expiration, I can do a search for contract expiration, whatever the value is, and it'll find the exact date. I can use greater than, I can use less than, because this is truly a date field. All right. So probably more than you ever wanted to know about managed properties, but I just find that it is a topic that most people who are even doing search don't really understand. It's kind of the black magic of working with search, but it makes life a lot easier. So what search is about for me is promoting content. It's about getting the information that end users are searching for. Let's face it, most of the time people hate SharePoint search, okay? A lot of times it has to do with the permissions. If you have just horrible permissions across your farm, people will either not be able to find something because they have too few results because they have too little permission to find the content, or worse, they have too much permission and they're able to see everything in the farm, and there's really no relevance that's working in their favor. So what I'm going to do is run through creating what we call a new vertical. We used to call it a new tab. Microsoft Marketing got a hold of that. They didn't like tab. Now we call it vertical because vertical sounds cool, right? We're going to create a new result source. We're going to create a new page. We'll go ahead and create the new tab by creating navigation. And then we'll apply a display template to make all of that work. Now, if you're going to create these tabs, if you're going to create these result sources, use jargon that makes sense for your company. I have a client that uses this, they have a file share, huge file share that we're trying to get them to stop putting content into, so we wanted to put it into SharePoint. So they put a tab up there that said archive. Nobody in the company had ever heard that they had an archive, so nobody clicked on the tab, right? As soon as they put home drive, Everybody's like, oh, I know what home drive is. And all of a sudden, we literally, in a day, we saw the clicks on that home drive tab go through the roof. So I'm going to create this as products, but just think about when you're in there, use your company jargon. Use your company jargon for these kinds of labels. Use what I call tribal terms, right? If people call it that horrible, horrible file share, then literally for the first couple of days, put that horrible, horrible file share as the tab. Because then people will know what it is. It becomes a little bit of an Easter egg, a little bit of a joke, but people will remember that. Okay, so let's run through this. There's several steps involved in creating a new search vertical. And so to be clear, what we're going to do is I'm glad my network connection is working, so my virus scanning is all up to date now. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new search vertical so that we can have a new tab here that shows off our products in a little bit better way. So I'm going to start out by creating a result source. So a result source is what we used to call a scope. So I come into result sources, and this is were any of you in Miguel Wood's session the other day, or not the other day, earlier this morning? He was talking about doing hybrid search. This is an approach you can use for hybrid search as well. If you want to have a tab for your Office 365 documents, you can do this same approach, and I'll show you that. I'm going to choose result source, and then in my result source, I'm going to call this products, and I'm choosing local SharePoint results. That's the local farm. Remote SharePoint, yep, that's Office 365. Unless you're in an Office 365 center and you have two-way, in which case local SharePoint is Office 365 and remote SharePoint would be your on-prem environment. You can also call an open search source. So if you want to do something off on Amazon.com and give people the opportunity to search there for whatever reason, you can do that. And you can also search Exchange. So this would be in an on-prem environment, you would have the Exchange option so that you could search your Exchange 2013 environment. Now, I'm going to choose local SharePoint search results because my products are SharePoint list items. But if I was doing people search, then I would choose people search results. In my query transform, I'm going to change this by using the query builder. And what we're going to do is we're simply going to refine on the content type. Content type equals product. When I test this query, it works. Now, I used to go and show you how all this went and then come back and fix this query, but it takes too much time when I'm running in Office 365 and I've only got an hour. So trust me, this is almost where you want to be. But the behavior that gets exhibited when you actually hit the tab with no query is this. Right away you get your results, which isn't what you expect in search. If there's no query, I should have no results. So the way we can change this query so that we can force it to use that same logic is by simply wrapping this in curly braces and putting a question mark at the beginning, which basically says, if there ain't no search term, don't do the search. So now if I test the query, I get no results. Disregard this personal favorites. That's a different part of the search result stack. You'll notice we don't have a search result here. If I do show more, I can now enter a search term like America, and it should bring back my Captain America and my SpongeBob SquarePants. Okay? So that's the behavior we want to see. So this is just a little detail that you put that little question mark in front of it with the curly braces, and life is good. Once I have all of that together, I choose Save, and now I can use that result source over and over and over again. If you did any scopes in SharePoint 2010, this replaces scopes, and the query language is so rich it just blows scopes out of the water. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is create a page. So I'm going to choose Add a Page. Now, if I add the page here, it's simply going to create a result page for me right away. Okay, so this is the default page. The other way to do this is to go into Site Contents, go into the Pages Library, and here, if you choose Files new document, you have a choice of all of the different content types. So if you're doing a publishing project and you created branded search pages, or you had different kinds of result pages, then they would all be listed here. If I choose page, it's going to give me the default results page, and I'll be ready to go. I'm going to call it product results. And in this case, I can use a space. And when I do, it's going to put a minus sign there. I'll just go ahead and take that out. But you'll notice that here's the content type. It's here's the page layout, which is the search results page. I'll choose create. It's going to create the page. It's going to throw it up into the library. I can choose product results here. And I've got my page. Now all I need to do is edit the page, edit the web part to use my result source. So we come up here. I got the navigation instead of the search results. Change the query. Now could I, instead of using a result source here for products, could I have put that same query here? Absolutely. Okay? So if you're not using content types make search so much easier. But if you're not using content types and you have that, can we just search that one list? Well, you can. And there's a couple different ways of doing that, like you can use the path to the list and things like that. But they're all what we call ew. Content types are the way to go. And by the way, I can do that test query here. We should be good to go. And come back up, change my display template. I can change my display template here if I want, or I can change my display template using a result type rule. In this case, since I did the result type rules yesterday, I'll go ahead and choose the product item from the list just to show you that I can apply a completely different result type or a different display template right in the web part. Now that I've got that changed, simply come up, choose Save, check in the page, and run a search. So this should give me back SpongeBob SquarePants and Captain America, and it does. Now we need to get it up on the tabs, because you'll notice that there's no tab up here for my page. So that's the last step. And this is where I discovered something really interesting during a demo, and I'll show you what it was. I'm going to go into Search Settings. I'm going to come down to Search Navigation. I'm going to add a link. What's the name on the link? Remember, this used to be a set of lists. And now it's actual navigation provider. So we'll come in and choose the page. We can even apply an audience to this. So if nobody wants to see the products except for the product team, then put the product team in as an audience. They're the only ones that'll see that. Go to product results. Choose OK here. If that page, if you didn't check the page in, this explodes horrendously. Okay? Once that's there, we're all good. So I was doing a demo, and I raced through and forgot to check the page in. I'd saved it, but I hadn't checked it in, and discovered that things just explode at that point. So I'll do my America search here. I'm not doing that to be annoying. I just happen to know I get at least 2 search results. And then I have my Products tab. Come over to Products, and there are my 2. So that's how you create a new search. That's how you create a new vertical in SharePoint 2013. Significantly easier than 2010, particularly because the display template part of it, that is usually the most time-consuming, is a lot easier in SharePoint 2013 and Office 365. Okay. So when we're talking about promoting content, we can use query rules. We ran through that yesterday. We can also use something called XRank. I like using XRank to solve some different little weird problems. Like, for instance, take that list of notaries. What if the notaries were for the whole company and the company was located in the UK and in America? It doesn't make sense to have the UK notary showing up if I'm looking for a notary in America, and likewise, you see Americans in your feed. And for some reason with search, it's always the stuff you don't want to see, right? It's always the stuff that's less relevant. It just happens that way, okay? So what I'm going to do is show you how you can use XRank in conjunction with the query that we ran in legal, so that we'll make the relevance be based on my office location or my office department, so that I'll see the notary who is closest to me at the top. Sound interesting? Maybe yes, no? Okay, we'll try. You can also do this. I've done demos of this where we take that same query, and we have the help desk tickets show up for your location based on your user profile location. Here are the things that are going wrong near you. Does one of these apply to you? So suddenly it's not just what you typed in, but it's also other things around you that are going wrong that may be impacting the question that you have. So if I come in here to legal, Ruby is in the, let's make sure of this. Let me go out to Delve here. And let's just verify that, that Ruby is in, that Ruby's in the finance department. You guys seen the new me view of Delve? So you go to profile, and it shows your organization, your about me, past projects. Come down here. It even shows custom user profile attributes. And it has her in. She's an auditor in finance. Okay. So it just so happens that Allie is in finance, but she's at the top. So what should happen when I change this is Ruby, who's down here in finance as well, should bounce above Garth when we're done. I know it's not a big change, it's a subtle change, but imagine if it was the bi-coastal situation where you want to find somebody who's in your office location. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to choose Edit. And we're going to change the query that's running in that web part. So I'm going to come over here and choose Edit Web Part. And I'm going to jump out here to my cheat sheet because I don't want to mess this query up like I did yesterday. So this is our query. And what I'm going to do is just drop this back in here. It's the same query we had before, but it just has a subtle difference to it. So we have that skills notary that's still there, but I also now have XRank. CB is content boost. You can look up the documentation on XRank. There's a lot of different things you can do with XRank. I'm just doing a simple content boost. I'm saying anything, any result that has a department that matches my department, so user.department, any attribute off the user profile can be replaced there for department, okay? So if the department is there and it matches the department of the person in the result, give it a 10 content boost. If that's not enough, give it a 100 content boost, okay? The thing is, most people get tied into this property filter selector. In the property filter selector or this query box, like here's the name of the user who runs the query. It injects text. It injects user.name. And a lot of people think that's the only thing off the user profile you can query on. This is dot notation. Just change that to the user profile attribute that you want to use in your query, and suddenly you can make these very relevant. So here's the magic. Allie, Garth, Ruby, right? Ruby and Allie are in the same department, obviously, as Ruby. When I test the query, it reorders itself, and now Ruby is more relevant than Garth. I know it's not a big deal, but it's really cool that you can do this kind of stuff. And you can do it in the UI, super easy. So choose OK there, choose OK here. Let our page refresh. just go ahead and publish this guy because we're done with it for the day. And what I ought to see now when the page loads is Allie and Ruby near the top. And I do. So simple, subtle, little changes that you can make that can have a huge impact on the way end users perceive search. So what about date refinement? Date refinement was a real problem for us when we were working in SharePoint. We're good till 12:45, am I right? I hate these ones that start at 45 minutes because I get, anyway. So this is the last set of demos, so let me explain what we're going to do here. I have a content type that is a contract. And this is based on an actual environment that I was working on with a client. And we thought we had everything hammered out. If I do content type, contract, oops, let me get a colon in there. Do that again. Thank you. How about a lowercase t? Okay. So I'm going to do my search for content type. So what I've done is created a simple little display template to show my contracts. Okay. With the client, what we actually did was we put a lot of this information, the most important information, on the main display template, and then we put like the companies and other information, ancillary information, in the hover card to make them more workable. You could even click on the customer and it would take you to the customer site. Their internal, like all the troubleshooting stuff that we had about that customer. So you make the Search Center actionable. Then it dawned on us, these projects, these contracts expire. So why not allow them to refine on contracts that are coming up for expiration? Easy, right? Should be. The out-of-the-box modified date field is easy. It's got this cool little slider. It only goes back in time. Awesome, right? Awesome. So that's why I came up with this demo. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on this. It's not just this demo, though. It's the things you can do with SharePoint that you should be totally unafraid to do in SharePoint, that you can make this kind of stuff very actionable. So we've got some expiration dates in here, 2015. I'll work with Mark later on and figure out how I can actually make those formatted the right way. I hate doing date formatting in JavaScript. So, but then I also have the last crawl time on here. And so I have a little plug later on from Michael Svensson, who showed me how to do this. He has a fabulous blog on doing all of this stuff in Office 365 as well. But the last crawl time in this case was April 16th. I've been working on this tenant. It's the 21st. This has not been recrawled because none of this content has changed. There's no reason for the crawler to come back through and touch this content. But it's very easy to display the last crawl time in your search results if you want to, or even query on it. Okay, so what I want to do is create a refiner over here for my contract expiration date. I showed you the managed property that we created, or the managed property that we reassigned, which was refinable date 01. We called it contract expiration date. So what I'm going to do is come in here and edit this page. And since we created that as a refinable field, I can come in, choose Edit Web Part. And I can choose my refiners. And in this case, I'm going to come down, I'm going to hit R, because that's going to get me down to the refinable fields. And then I find refinable date 01. I'm going to move this guy all the way to the top. And you'll notice right away that a couple cool things happen. First of all, it reruns the query and tells you here are some sample values. So you kind of know that you got the right refiner. It also tells you this is the alias that's in that managed property. Okay? If you don't fill in the display name, it's going to use refinable date 01. That'll be the default name of the refiner. So we're going to come in here and call this contract expiration. Now, the refinable item means that it's just straight text. If I want to, I could change that to slider with bar graph. But for the sake of the demo, I'm going to leave it at refinement item. And then show you that the defaults are either last day, in other words, in the last 24 hours, a week ago, a month ago, 6 months ago, and a year ago. Contract expiration is in the future. Everything's going to be in this horrible way because it says defined in the search schema. In other words, let me take my best guess. Notice 8, 8, 8, 8. I'm going to take my best guess. I'm going to kind of equally distribute your search results and give you really random dates. Really random dates. So we want to fix that. But let me show you the default experience to start with. I'm going to choose OK. Then you always have to remember, particularly when doing demos, choose OK down here. And then you can check the page in. Okay, so we're sort of there. We've got less than Thursday, August, whatever, on Thursday, August 13th, on Wednesday, March 16th, etc. But it's not really where we want it to be. So this is where you have to be a little bit of a SharePoint hacker. I come in here and I choose Edit Page. I go ahead and open up the refinement web part and I export it. Asif, do you teach people how to export web parts? You show them the little wizard behind the curtain. There it is. You keep it secret? Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and choose Save As. We'll save this guy to my desktop. And we'll open it. So I'm going to open this in Notepad++. And it is just a web part. It's XML. So if I change my language here to XML, it'll make it a little easier. And these are all of the properties in the web part that the web part supports. Some of them show up in the UI. Some of them don't. The main one that we're looking for is associated with that contract expiration date. So I'm going to do a search for EXPIRATION. And I'm going to choose Find. Okay. So this is a very ugly property because it's all JSON, okay? But I notice that I have contract expiration date. That's my display name for my refiner. Use default intervals. False. That's because we had the second radio button chosen. If you had the first radio button chosen, it'd say true, and you would change it to false. Then in here, we have this intervals that's set to null. This is where we can put in our own intervals, even going into the future. So by default, if you're thinking of that 1 day, 1 week, 1 year, that's -1, -30, -60, -365. So we're going forward in time. So what I'm going to do is pull out this guy, because again, I knew I was going to be pressed for time, and I didn't want to not find this value. So I'm going to use 30 days, 90 days, 180 days, a year, and 2 years. And I'm just going to copy that in to right here. Now this is an array, so you have to use the square brackets. Okay? So I've got that set. So we'll save our web part. And then it's called the refinement web, it's on my desktop right here. It's called the refinement web part. So now we have to do a little SharePoint 2-step, and that's delete the one that's there because we got all the properties out of it, so we don't need it anymore. And then what we're going to do is we're going to choose add web part, and we're going to choose upload web part. Browse for the one that's on our desktop. Choose open, and this is weird. I think the people who built this ribbon didn't know about this feature because you choose upload and it goes boop. But then you come back and choose add web part and it says, oh, this one? So you say, yes, that one. Thank you. Choose add. So now that we've done that, we now get better refinement, but we're still not quite there. So the last step in this is I created a item filter. This is how we create refiners. And so my filter contract date, if I edit this guy, I just pulled out the default refinement item filter. I renamed the file. I renamed the title so that I could find it in the picker. And then I created a custom range. So basically, the list data element is where your refiner names are coming from. So what I said was if, because I didn't want this to interfere with other lists, I said if the override display name, the alias, equals contract expiration, then run this code. If you've got greater than 6, less than 30 days, 30 plus, 90 plus, 180 plus, 1 year, 2 years. Once you have this in place, I uploaded it to SharePoint like I showed you yesterday, dropped it in the filters folder, although I was informed afterwards, you can put them anywhere as long as they're in the help me out, as long as they're in the master page gallery, then they'll show up. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply that display template. So come back in, choose refiners, choose refinable date 1. Then in here, instead of refinement item, I'm going to choose contract date refinement item. Choose OK. Choose OK. Check the page in. Go ahead and publish because we're done. And now what I've got is, can you guys see this? I've got less than 30 days. So when is the contract going to expire? In the next 30 days. 30 or more, 90 or more, 180 or more, a year, show more. It's because this web part happens to be configured to only show those 5 refiners, show more up to 2 years. So as you start working your way through these, you can start refining and actually having an actionable results page to help you find the different refiner or the different contracts that are up for expiration. Now you could also change the query so that if someone searches for a contract and one of them is about to expire, put a query rule at the top that says, hey, by the way, these are about to expire. Okay, make those queries actionable. So that's managed properties, refiners, going all the way through using the display template stuff we did yesterday, and then creating those default buckets. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. You can, because this is all, and yesterday I did a session where I showed how to do more with graphical refiners and metals and things like that. But you can swap these out for images. You can inject any kind of HTML you want into that page. You could even do, some jQuery if you wanted, and have the refiner actually do another call and go find out who the person is who has the most contracts up for expiration. Show their user profile photo. Okay? I like to expose people for not doing their job. I get a lot of bad publicity about it. But why not? If you knew that if your contracts were up for expiration, your face was going to be right there next to the expiring contract, you might be a little more. Public shaming is totally underrated. All right. Oh, and by the way, if anybody knows how to force PowerPoint to never go into full screen mode or into that other mode, let me know. Okay, so some clever tricks. There is a recrawl flag that you can set at the list and at list, library, and site level, so you can go in and click those. Also, you can set sites so that they are not available in search. So there are ways to hide sites from search. This crawl time trick is documented by Michael Svensson. I'm not going to go into it, but basically I taught you how to do it. There is an internal :323 field. That's totally intuitive, right? I knew that was crawl time. That's where SharePoint puts the date that item was last crawled. Michael shows you in a blog post how to actually create that crawled property if you don't see it. SharePoint will populate it when it does the crawls, and then you surface it using a managed property like I showed you. There's also something called the VTI_search version attribute in the property bag. He's got a blog post on how to populate that, and it will force a recrawl of your site. It doesn't change the scope. It doesn't change the schedule for the crawl, but it does force a recrawl. So you could potentially write a PowerShell script that flagged every site you had to be recrawled. That one. And so I showed you, the only demo, I'm a little pressed for time, the only demo I was going to do here was just show you on the bottom of that contract item that we put that attribute in there. Come on. Okay, so some of the tools that I use when I'm doing my debugging, I depend on F12 in IE all the time and 2 screens, because Doing hover cards without having 2 monitors is a royal pain, because every time you do your hover card, it breaks. The UI pops up so you can do your debugging, and then you're trying to trace through. It's awful. So 2 screens is a must there. I just justified you getting 2 screens. There is a SharePoint 2013 search query tool that a couple MVPs put together and have continued to maintain. This is invaluable. It allows you to connect to SharePoint in the cloud or SharePoint on-prem, execute queries, see what's coming back, and really troubleshoot the problems that you might be having with search. It's called the SP 2013 search tool, and it's freely available out on CodePlex, incredibly powerful. If you haven't seen this and you want a demo, just ask. I'll be happy to show you. I've also got a blog post on how to create a debug display template. And what this display template does, it replaces all of the standard code in the display template and does a property enumerator. It just says for I until I run out of properties, give me the property name and the property value. And sometimes that will really save your bacon when you're trying to figure out why one kind of query is just not doing its thing. And so you can use that as well. And so that's on my blog, and very easy to find. This is Michael's blog, highly recommended, and this is where he enumerates how to do the crawl time trick. And he actually has the PowerShell script that I ran to make my client display the the crawl time as well. If you're on-prem, you can use PowerShell. If you're in the cloud, you upload a new search config like I showed you yesterday, and it will populate that values for you the next time your content is crawled. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. I've had a really good time. And if you have any questions, I'll hang around for a little bit. Otherwise, have a great rest of the conference. Thank you so much.